So good morning, India. This is Amritanshu Vajpayee. I welcome you all on behalf of all the collaborating institutions on this platform of Scientific Knowledge for Youth Foundation and on behalf of EduSTEM Initiative Global, Sky Amateur Astronomers Club, Women-led Science Club, and Ignited Minds Science Club, and all the three collaborating institutions of us directly from Rajasthan and Gujarat. We really welcome you to today's program. And I welcome you all on behalf of the collaborating partners and the Akash Ganga Center for Astronomy, the intellectual partners also. We have the representatives of all the coordinating clubs in form of Dr. Chandramouli Joshi, Mr. Gajendra Gepala, Shri Mohan Ram Irania, Swapnil Rastogi, and Shweta. I welcome you all on behalf of all. Today, as we all know, we have gathered here for a special event on the upcoming birth anniversary ऑफ डॉक्टर विक्रम साराभाई। जैसे कि हम जानते हैं कि आज हम इस मंच पर सभी लोग एकत्रित हुए हैं हमारे आने वाले एक विशेष जन्म जयंती समारोह को लेकर के, जो कि डॉक्टर विक्रम अम्बालाल साराभाई का जन्म दिवस 12 अगस्त को आने वाला है। तो उसके सेलिब्रेशन के लिए, उस जन्म दिवस को मनाने के लिए अब की बार हम सभी लोग यहाँ पर एकत्रित हुए हैं। आज हमारा गेस्ट लेक्चर सेशन हमारे अतिथि वक्ता डॉक्टर नरेंद्र भंडारी जी के द्वारा दिया जाएगा। इससे पहले कि हमारे आकाश गंगा सेंटर फॉर एस्ट्रोनॉमी के डायरेक्टर डॉक्टर भरत नागेश अडूर जी संबोधित करें आप सभी को आज के प्रोग्राम के, आज के व्याख्यान के बारे में ज्यादा डिटेल चर्चा करते हुए, और साथ ही साथ वो अपना विशिष्ट योगदान डॉक्टर विक्रम साराभाई और एक अन्य हमारे विशिष्ट वेरी इंटेलेक्चुअल पर्सनैलिटी डॉक्टर वेणु बापू whose birthday is also coming tomorrow, उन सभी दोनों हमारी विभूतियों के जीवन और व्यक्तित्व और कृतित्व पर प्रकाश डालते हुए डॉक्टर भरत अडूर आप सभी को संबोधित करें। मैं आज के इस वर्चुअल प्लेटफॉर्म पर हमारे कुछ सम्मानित विशिष्ट अतिथि यहाँ पर मौजूद हैं, उन सभी को अपने कोलैबोरेटिंग इंस्टीट्यूशंस की तरफ से वेलकम करना चाहूंगा। विशेष रूप से डॉक्टर JB मिस्त्री, डीन सेंट जेवियर्स कॉलेज मुंबई एंड फाउंडर मेंबर AAA मुंबई, आपका स्वागत है सर। साथ ही साथ मैं वेलकम करना चाहूंगा डॉक्टर रमेश चंद्र कपूर का, जो कि हमारे रिटायर्ड IIA के हमारे रिप्रेजेंटेटिव हैं, जो कि रिलेटिविस्टिक एस्ट्रोफिजिक्स, ब्लैक होल्स, व्हाइट होल्स, क्वासर्स और पल्सर्स पर अपने रिसर्च के लिए जाने जाते हैं। आपका स्वागत है कपूर सर। और साथ ही साथ मैं स्वागत करना चाहूंगा मिस अर्चिका डोगरा का, जो कि फाउंडर और मैनेजिंग डायरेक्टर इनोवर्ज सिएटल US से हमारे साथ जुड़ रही हैं। वेलकम अर्चिका ऑन बोर्ड टुडे। And also a special word of welcome to Dr. Ankush Bhaskar, a postdoc from the Goddard Space Center. You are the real pride of India for the younger generation and a source of inspiration. Welcome, Dr. Bhaskar. And also the representatives of 2 asteroid search campaigns. Asteroid search campaign जो कि हमारा इंटरनेशनल एस्ट्रॉइड सर्च कोलैबोरेशन के द्वारा कंडक्ट किया जा रहा है, उसमें हमारे 2 भारतीय टीमें सप्तऋषि इंडिया और साथ ही साथ मार्स जी इंडिया ऑब्जर्वेटरी के रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स आज इस मंच पर मौजूद हैं। तो मैं सप्तऋषि इंडिया के जो टीम मेंबर्स हैं उनका मैं स्वागत करता हूं। साथ ही साथ स्वागत करता हूं टीम लीडर मार्स जी इंडिया ऑब्जर्वेटरी श्री SN सुकुमार सर का, कि उन्होंने हमारे मंच की शोभा बढ़ाई। आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। तथा विशेष वेलकम डॉक्टर कृष्णानंद सिन्हा, द अल्टीमेट सोलर एस्ट्रोफिजिसिस्ट इन माय ओपिनियन, एंड ऑल्सो डॉक्टर संदीप भट्टाचार्य, द डेप्यूटी डायरेक्टर BM बिड़ला प्लेनेटेरियम जयपुर। इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ मैं आपको ज्यादा समय लिए बिना मैं इनवाइट करता हूं डॉक्टर भरत अडूर को, डायरेक्टर आकाश गंगा सेंटर फॉर एस्ट्रोनॉमी, कि वो इस मंच पर आए और प्रोफेसर वेणु बापू, साथ ही साथ डॉक्टर विक्रम साराभाई के व्यक्तित्व और कृतित्व पर प्रकाश डालते हुए हम सभी लोगों के सामने डॉक्टर नरेंद्र भंडारी का वेलकम करें। वेलकम, ओवर टू यू भरत सर। भरत सर, आप अपने आप को अनम्यूट कीजिए और अपना संबोधन प्रारंभ कीजिए।
Namaskar, Pranipat to all my teachers. In fact, when I am talking about Vikram Sarabhai, it was a very short time that I had been able to see him. That was somewhere in 1970 when he had visited TIFR, and I'm sure I was able to see him along with several stalwarts of cosmic ray physics, and hence my association with him was very short, probably only for I had a glimpse of him, I could say, But definitely I will say that talking about Vikram Sarabhai today has a very special significance because we are now in the stage of doing space science in a very big way. And here I would like to just point out to you some of the facts that uh, the physical research laboratory was actually started by Dr. Vikram Sarabhai at his home, which was Retreat, at his residence, and the research over there was on cosmic ray physics. And his casual visit to TIFR was to see the nuclear emulsion plates. Hence, I had an occasion to see him from a very close distance. But no, I hadn't been able to talk to him or otherwise because we were scanners there in the emulsion section. Okay, so this is how we had a short glimpse of Vikram Sarabhai. But let me tell you, further, he began not only there, the institute was later at MG Science Institute in Ahmedabad in November 1947, and thereafter, uh, Ahmedabad Education Society was the benefactor, or they used to assist physical research laboratory there. And the first director was Professor Kalapati Ramakrishnan Ramanathan was the first director of the institute because and then he not only developed PRL and the most interesting thing that I would like to tell you is the many departments at the TIFR, which was in geophysics lab in C block. I strongly remember that also. Dr. Bhandari, Dr. Venkatvardan were all in geophysics lab then, and that's how our interaction with Sarabhai Institute or Physical Research Laboratory was further developed. Dr. Sarabhai not only developed space science, he developed even several other institutions, and probably the most highlighted situation was creating Aryabhatta, the first Indian made satellite to go into space. Though it was put by the Russian uh, rockets, he was the founder of Indian Space Research Organization. Further, he also developed Indian Institute of Management, and then he uh, he further began uh, many institutions in Ahmedabad, uh, and one of them was Vikram Sarabhai had created was Kasturbhai Lalubhai for establishment of IIM, Indian Institute of Management. Further, he was also a chairman of Atomic Energy Commission of India from 66 to 71. Further, he was strongly supported by Homi Bhabha during his programs, which happened both in the TIFR, in the C block, and also later he also helped in the launching station at Chumba, which was on the coast of Arabian Sea in 1963. Further, I have to come cut short here and then come down to Dr. Bapu in a short exposure to that, how Dr. Bapu was instrumental, father of the modern Indian astronomy. Manali Kalak Venu Bapu was the father of modern Indian astronomy, was born into Kia family on the 10th August, that is tomorrow, in 1927 in Chennai. The only child of his father, Manali Kukuzu Bapu, and here I want to mention one thing. His father was a royal astronomer at Nizami Observatory in Andhra Pradesh. And today I have to specifically mention about Bapu because my association with Professor Bapu goes back to 1977 onwards, and we had very close collaboration. He was a father figure to all of us who were then getting into astronomy. I have to owe my pranipat to Professor Bapu. And finally, I have to talk about today's speaker, which I feel very proud. Pranipat sir, Narendra Bhandari ji, Namaskar. I am
Namaskar.
very happy and feeling that I am showing a small lamp to such a big sun of astronomy and astrophysics. Thank you so much, Professor Bhandari sir. Just to give a small, Professor Bhandari was born on November 10th, 1947. We wish you a very elaborate uh, condition where you will be able to guide all of us into doing not only meteor and meteorites and meteor physics, but near Earth asteroids and probably beyond. He had his earlier education in Jodhpur, in the Sardar Senior Higher Secondary School in Jodhpur, and later his BSc and MSc were at JNVU Jodhpur. Dr. Bhandari, we had met in TIFR earlier, and my associations with him goes back to 78 onwards. And I was very happy to go to because their lab in the C block was just opposite to Professor P.K. Malhotra and Dr. Ganguly. So our coming there was very regular. Hence, we had an chance occasion to meet Professor Bhandari then also. And further, I have to tell you few things about him. He is not only known in the area of cosmic ray physics, in the radionuclides in the atmosphere, but he has also been a very staunch worker on meteorites and on moon too. And he had been at his main work was on several short-lived radionuclides in rainwater and radionuclides as a tracers for terrestrial and planetary and solar processes. And here I have to say only one thing. He was the first, probably the first astronomer or geophysicist to have Apollo and Luna samples, moon samples, here in Mumbai and thereafter in PRL. So I think I have, he has several awards, but I will not be able to because I want you to interact with him. Thank you so much, sir, for giving me the opportunity to talk to you and know about your so much of your contribution to meteors and meteorites and so on. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Bharat Adud, for a very kind introduction.
Thanks, Bharat sir. And before Bhandari sir begins, I would just like to roll out a couple of instructions to all the audience who are here. I would just request on behalf of the organizers to kindly keep yourself muted to allow the speaker for the day, Dr. Bhandari, to speak in a hassle-free manner. And you have just to pin the screen of Dr. Narendra Bhandari, which is under his name. There are two screens. One of it is the speaking screen for Dr. Bhandari, and the second one is the presenting screen. So in order to enjoy the hassle-free talk from the behalf of the organizers, I will just request you to kindly pin the screen of Dr. Bhandari and keep yourself muted. For any query, we would just request on behalf of all the organizers again, मेरा आपसे करबद्ध निवेदन है कि कृपया अपने क्वेरीज को चैट बॉक्स में लिखें और आपकी क्वेरीज को टॉक खत्म होने के उपरांत हमारे ऑर्गेनाइजर्स के होस्ट के द्वारा डॉक्टर भंडारी के तक पहुंचाया जाएगा और यदि समय रहा तो उनका जवाब भी आपको हमारे वक्ता के द्वारा दिया जाएगा। और इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ मैं डॉक्टर भरत अडूर की टॉक को समराइज करते हुए उसमें एक शब्द और जोड़ना चाहूंगा कि 5 लोग जिनका बहुत महत्वपूर्ण योगदान हमारे भारत के डेवलपमेंट में, जहां पर आज भारत पहुंचा है, उसमें है। आप इन 5 लोगों को आप नेग्लेक्ट नहीं कर सकते। उनमें हैं डॉक्टर मनाली कल्लत मेनू बापू, डॉक्टर विक्रम अम्बालाल साराभाई, डॉक्टर होमी जहांगीर भाभा, डॉक्टर एपीजे अब्दुल कलाम और साथ ही साथ जहांगीर रतन दादा भाई टाटा, जेआरडी टाटा। तो इन 5 जो हमारे देश के पंच रत्न हैं, जो वी ओ द रियल डेवलपमेंट ऑफ इंडिया टू मेनी, but these are the 5 specific people to whom we are celebrating the coming 5 days, and beginning with the special guest session on Dr. Vikram Sarabhai today by Narendra Bhandari sir. So without wasting any time, with a digital round of applause, I would just invite Dr. Bhandari onto the stage, digital platform today. Sir, you may kindly begin your presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Vajpayee, and also to Bharat Adur. You know, this is the birth centenary of Vikram Sarabhai, the father of a space program in India. And he died at a tender age of 53 years. So when I was young, I used to get a lot of problems in doing anything, and always used to take excuse to what can one man do? What can I do about the system? But when I met Homi Baba, I worked under him at TIFR, and also Vikram Sarabhai's lab, I work in that. When I interacted with them, I was really inspired and convinced that only one man can do great things. Both of them started from scratch. There was nothing. Homi Bhabha developed the whole Atomic Energy Commission out of nothing, and Vikram Sarabhai developed this space program. I can imagine how many problems they must be having, because 30 years later, people were asking the same question when we started with this mission to moon. So just to mention briefly, my first interaction with Dr. Sarabhai was when I wrote a proposal for getting moon samples from USA, Apollo samples, then it has to be routed through Atomic Energy Commission. So I met him at the old Yacht Club, that is Gateway of India, where he used to have his office. And he inquired many things, I remember, and he wanted to know whether we can really do all those things which I mentioned in the proposal. And finally, he signed it. So I was struck by the fact that he knew so much about difficulty in doing, in analyzing lunar samples. But at that time, I didn't know that finally I'll end up in the laboratory created by him. So I hope you can see this slide, my slides. So I would like to pay my tribute to Sarabhai by discussing Chandrayaan-1. Now you may be wondering why Chandrayaan-1, which is an old mission, it's a part of history. I should talk about Chandrayaan-2 or Mars mission or something more recent. But as you know, the first attempt, the first thing is always the most difficult. So I chose to discuss Chandrayaan-1 for 2 or 3 reasons. One is that it was the first attempt to go outside the Earth, outside the Earth's gravity, and we had enormous difficulty, and we had to start with scratch, essentially. And secondly, very little is known about Chandrayaan-1. In fact, people still ask what came out of it. So I thought I'll take this opportunity to tell you what we have learned from Chandrayaan-1. And thanks to our Prime Minister and the media, that Chandrayaan-2 and the Mars mission, actually you know all about it as much as can be known. But Chandrayaan-1 was in the olden days when Not much media coverage was there, and it was done quietly. So I thought this is a good time to talk about Chandrayaan-1. Question is, how do you describe a man like Vikram Sarabhai? You look at his picture and he looks, in his vision, he looks like a visionary. He was an institute builder, as Bharat Adur had said. He was a scientist, and he was a able administrator, and he was many things actually. He was a pioneer in new administrative systems. I just mentioned one or two here. He evolved his own administrative system. For example, if you write a proposal, a scientific proposal, then he does not call you in the office and discuss or read it. He will call you for a walk in the lawns of PRL and ask everything very informally for hours together. He used to come early, and he will approve or disapprove it there, but he won't say anything. You will finally get a letter later on that it has been approved or not. So that is his mechanism of talking to scientists very closely, very informally, and very intimately. And same thing he developed for reviewing various activities in different laboratories. ISRO has over 20 laboratories or even more in the country. And you see, normal mode is that you call those people to your office, call a meeting, and they all come and you ask them what they are doing. But he developed a procedure, a very efficient one, where he used to go and visit the place, see the progress on site, talk to them, and it had the additional advantage that you don't disturb the work. That is why in a short time he accomplished so much. He won't disturb anybody, he would visit them. So the joke at that time was that if you want to meet Sarabhai, you go to the airport, because he will be traveling to some place or the other to review. In any case, I'll just tell you one story about his way of working. You see, in ISRO, we have this tradition of combining technology and science. There are no missions which have no scientific or technological objectives. You see, normally in other space agencies, they develop technology first, make it successful, and then do science with it. But he had this unique way of doing science and technology together. So when he started the space program, he wanted to use science. And you see this picture, 6 decades, 1963 or around that time, the space program in India started. And you see this, we had two types of satellites, PSLV and GSLV. We have two types of satellites here, the remote sensing satellite IRS series and the INSET. So he had this thing, but he wanted to do science and not just make a rocket. So he went, he realized that the equatorial atmosphere has not been studied. All the work is at high latitude by America and Germany and other countries. So he selected a site at equator, and he wanted to understand how this equatorial atmosphere behaves. So that will be new science. So he went and selected a place, and you see this background, a small church here. He went there and said, this is the ideal site because it is close to geomagnetic equator, and all the ionosphere will be affected by the magnetic field of the earth, and he can do equatorial astronomy. So he went there to this church, and there was Father Pereira there, and he said, I want to work here and develop a rocket launching site, that is the SLV, satellite launch vehicle. The father was really amazed. He said, "Oh, Vikram, you are asking my children their abode," because some students used to live there. There was a school near the church. So you are asking my children's abode, my abode, he also used to live there, and God's abode, the church. How is it possible? And he was non-committal. But then he invited Sarabhai for a prayer meeting next morning and introduced him to his children of the school, saying, "Dear children, here is a scientist, Professor Vikram Sarabhai. What do scientists do? All of us experience, including this church, the light from electricity. I am able to talk to you through the mic, which is made possible by technology. The treatment to patients by doctors come from medical sciences through technology, enhances the comfort and quality of human life. That is what scientists do. And what do I do? As a preacher, I pray for you, for your well-being, for your peace. In short, what Vikram is doing and what I am doing are the same. Both science and spirituality seek the Almighty's blessing for human prosperity in body and mind." And he gave the whole place, the school and children's hostel and his house. And that is how space program started. So that is an amazing way how he used to tackle people. I think it will be very difficult at the present time to do such things. So this is ISRO's journey from 1963 to 2020. They were carrying the rocket, this is the nose cone, on a cycle, because the road was not even car worthy or a truck could go. And first it was small one, so they used to carry it on a cycle. Then two people used to go on foot carrying this rocket there for launching. And in 10 years, in 1981, more than that, I think nearly 18 years, we had a bullock cart. So the rocket was carried through bullock cart. So very slow progress. And then in 2008, we had this moon mission, the Chandrayaan-1. So I'll be mostly talking about Chandrayaan-1. We have a lot of applications, you know, about our space program. You know, the people used to ask him, and they asked us also 30 years later, that can we afford it? Should India do a space program? It is so expensive. And I don't know, he must be having more problem than we have. But he convinced the people that there is no other choice. So he wrote somewhere that we will use the space technology for the betterment of society and for improvement of people in the country, and bring technology to their place so that they have better life. I think that was his punchline, how he sold the space program to the government. 30 years later, of course, today, you know, this it is being used for disaster management and for tsunamis and for cyclones, and we have TV and mobile and everything. I think there is no home which is not having a satellite facility, some facility which depends on the satellite communication. We get our rainfall, crop management. What used to take 1 year for the country to find out how much crop will be produced till the next season comes, they won't get the number. Now it can be obtained within 24 hours. So that's a very big leap forward, and I think we must pay our tribute to Sarabhai for making our life so good and so easy and so comfortable. Coming to my topic of Chandrayaan-1, I chose it because this was the first attempt, and our first problem was what new we can do because we didn't want to, rediscover the wheel. So in 1994 or 95, when PSLV became successful, I was walking down the corridor and we were congratulating each other that the rocket flight has been successful. And a friend of mine who is an expert on orbit, he told me that, this can go to the moon. And I didn't believe him, because of course I was working on moon samples those days, brought from Apollo and even Russian Luna missions. So he knew that I'm working on the moon. So he said, you can go there with this PSLV. And I could hardly believe him. So we met the chairman and tried to sound him. And he said, we don't do such exotic things which have no impact on the society. So we have lots of things for next several years. We have to do remote sensing and crop management and for defense and for mapping and for planning and so on. So I don't think we will have time for doing this. So this whole mission was the moon project was not even taken up for many years. Then one day in 1998, after 3-4 years, I got a call from our chairman at the time, and he said, now we are ready to go to the moon because we have more or less obtained, achieved our objectives of remote sensing and everything is well developed. So I must give credit and pay tribute to also Dr. Kasturi Rangan, who initiated the moon mission. And the first problem I was given is that what new you can do. And 50 odd missions had already taken place. And what new we can do, I don't know. I had to think over. So then we thought of this, this yellow line here. We thought that all these Apollo samples were collected from equatorial region. Even Russian samples, of course, robotic, not manned, were also collected from near the equator. So we said, let us go and look at the poles. So we designed a polar orbiter in every 2 hours, it will have a 120-minute orbit. So every hour, it will see one of the poles and go over the poles and find something new. That is one approach to explore new places when your instruments are not very great, not very sensitive, then you can do very little science with new technology. So we designed, this is Chandrayaan-1, what you see in pink and black. And since this is all historical, I'll only tell you some stories. So this is going to be very easy talk for you also. So we had a lot of challenges there. One is innovation. We had to innovate what new we can do. We have to miniaturize. We have to have autonomous operation, a launch strategy, because this PSLV, later on I learned that it can take only a few kilograms. So it cannot take very heavy load. And of course, infrastructure had to be developed. And as I told you, I'll just be telling you some stories. So first thing in infrastructure we needed is an antenna which can communicate 400,000 kilometers away. We didn't have any antenna at that time. And we contacted several countries had, USA had, Russia had, there is one in Australia and so on. And actually you don't need one, you need actually 3, because one antenna can only cover 120 degrees angle. So you have to monitor it all the 360 degrees all through the orbit. And when somebody approached these people, they said, no, our antennas are very busy, booked for next many years, and we don't have time to look into your mission. And even if you have some time free, it will cost $2,000 per hour. That is a lot of money if you want to monitor a satellite for 6 months. You can calculate. So this, without antenna, of course, you can't go there. So people on the committee had a brilliant idea. It's good to have people from Gujarat on that. They said, why not we build one? And this $2,000 per hour, we can recover the cost in very little time. It cost about 100 crore of rupees. And then Dr. Shiv Kumar built one within less than a year. And it is near Bangalore in Bailalu, where he actually didn't make only one, but two antennas. Just like we have this TV dish of about a foot diameter, or 2 feet diameter to receive a satellite signal, you need about 100-foot antenna to talk to moon and in deep space. Therefore, these two antennas, one I think about smaller and one this 100-foot antenna were built. This type of problems we had. I'll also tell you about miniaturization. Dr. Annadurai was our project director, and he gave certain weight for our instruments. So he said, you have 50 kilograms to build all the instruments you want. And of course, before that, when they were going in Earth orbit, they didn't have any restriction on weight because you can put as much weight as you like. But when you go to moon, every gram counts. So in 50 kilogram, we had chosen the objective that we'll do mineralogical, chemical, and photogeological mapping. It will have a 100 kilometer circular polar orbiter. So from 100 kilometer, we look at the moon and it will work for 2 hours. And this weight which it can carry, about 1500 or 1400 kilogram, was distributed for housekeeping, for spacecraft, for so on and so forth. And power and weight are two big restrictions. So we had to really miniaturize everything. And when these people in Space Application Center under guidance of Dr. Kiran Kumar and at Leos in Bangalore and so many SPL, Space Physics Laboratory and so on, they all built these 5 instruments we had selected. Then actually the weight came down to about 40 kg. Before that, Annadurai used to tell us that you can't even put an extra screw. There is no possibility of increasing the weight even by little bit. So we be within this limit. So we finished our objective in 40 kilogram, and there were 10 kilograms to spare. So what we did at that time, we approached our friends abroad and asked if some instrument is ready, because we didn't have time to build new instrument. So about 4 or 5 instruments came from abroad, and 5 instruments were from India, and so on. So this is the diagram of Chandrayaan-1, and this is the first mission which had really international character, and I can tell you more stories about it. Because it was international in character, we had to call those scientists to India, and I had a conference organized in Udaipur, so that our Indian scientists can talk to the foreign scientists, and we can actually settle how to, meet our specifications, both of us, their instruments and our satellite and so on. And of course, Dr. Kalam was the president at the time, and he's the rocket man of India. So we invited him to inaugurate the conference. And he came and he, of course, invited. And after that, I'll just tell you two small stories. Um, um, after his talk, after Kalam's introduction, I had a talk on this objectives of Chandrayaan mission and the instruments, and then we met for lunch. Then Dr. Kalam, in his characteristic style, said that, "Oh, you are going to the moon, but you are not going to the moon." And I actually didn't understand it for a minute. But then he clarified immediately, and he said, "You are going all the way, but not landing on moon. So why don't you put something on moon?" So this is his contribution. This box you see, this is the impact probe. This impact probe was on the suggestion of Dr. Kalam that something should impact on the moon. Otherwise, what is the use of going all the way and not touching the moon? I was amazed. So this impact probe is the contribution of Dr. Kalam. And immediately our chairman, Madhavan Nair, was the chairman at that time. And Annadurai both agreed. The same person who was telling that you can't even put a screw agreed to put nearly 30 kilogram of weight here. And I was wondering how, this presidential order can defy Newton's gravity. And we can put this 28 kilogram or 30 kilogram extra weight when we were told that not even one screw can be put. So anyway, this is how it went. This is Annadurai with the real model of Chandrayaan being in the clean room. And this is the impact probe and all this. And there are a lot of innovations here. I don't have time to go through all the stories, but there are very nice stories about every step here. Now then, finally the day arrived when we had to go to the moon, and that is another very difficult decision to make, because when we asked Annadurai, when will all these things be assembled and ready for launch, he said it won't be before 20th of October. And actually the window was before that. There are only 2 windows in a month to go to the moon. And the next window was on 5th of November. So we can't wait till 5th of November because this northeast monsoon will be very active. So then it means that this thing will be postponed by 3-4 months. By February or so, when the northeast monsoon withdraws, then only you can launch the satellite, because November is very difficult and it won't be ready before October. So at that time, we were wondering what to do. And then somebody came up with a brilliant idea that why not we launch and keep it in parking orbit around the Earth, and then send it to moon later on 5th of November. So we had this parking orbit, and that turned out to be very good, because actually you gain energy as you go around the Earth. You know about this Earth's gravity contributed to the, if you give a little boost here, it acquires bigger orbit. So that was very good. Actually, I must say that this monsoon does not interfere with the instruments as far as water is concerned or rain is concerned. Only if there is a electric, this lightning, then the instruments can get damaged. So it is better to avoid lightning. Rain is not so much as a problem. So we had a 10-minute window on 22nd of October, and it was launched, and it was quite successful. And we had our own antenna, and it was very cloudy that day. There are many things happened. It was actually given clearance by the chairman late in the night, because there were some problems on the launch pad and so on. I won't go through it. I'll come to the science part of it a little bit. and tell you how moon affects the earth. So this is very important, that the moon is a very big body compared to other satellites of other planets. And when it goes around the earth, it actually stabilizes the earth's orbit. So earth would be wobbling if moon was not there. Not only wobbling, it was actually spinning at very high speed at, I think its rotation period, which is now 24 hours, was only, so to say, 5 hours in the beginning when the moon was formed. So Earth was rotating one full rotation every 5 hours, spinning very fast. And it is now comfortable 24 hours, so you can do some work. Otherwise, as soon as you get up and have a cup of tea, it is evening. And as soon as you lie down, it becomes morning, you hardly get a wink of sleep. So that is, moon has a very important role in our life. It reduced the spin of the earth from 5 hours to 24 hours because of tidal forces. And most important, if moon was not there, we won't be there. Because let me explain this to you, that it is said that life on earth started in the ocean. Now, ocean marine animals came to land, to coastal areas, because of the pull because of the tides of the earth. As you can see in Bombay these days, high tides, they come and wash off the shores. And some animals were left on the shore. They couldn't go back. And those fellows evolved. This Darwinian evolution is there. So they learned how to walk, and that is how land animals came into existence. So we won't be there if moon was not there, and this is very important. So I think there are many reasons why we should study moon, because we owe our existence to moon, we owe our stable earth to the moon, and the wobble has reduced, which makes our temperature very comfortable between plus 50 and minus 50 degrees. Otherwise, probably it will go to 100 degrees centigrade and we can't survive anyway. So here is a picture you can see in honor of Sarabhai's contribution to space. One crater has been named after him. This is Vikram Sarabhai crater. Another is after Bose and Bhabha crater on the backside of the moon. And you can very well see the front and backside asymmetry. This remains one of the enigmas to understand. So why go to the moon? For two things. Firstly, you can learn about Earth-Moon relationship, and I told you how important it is. And second is, you can learn about origin and evolution of moon. And thirdly, the sun's radiation, which directly fall on Earth but cannot reach the Earth's ground because of the atmosphere, go on and hit the moon rocks. And we can learn about the sun more from the moon than from launching some satellites from here. You see, if you launch the satellite, you learn what is happening now on the sun, what particles, what energy spectrum, what composition, what intensity, what frequency. But if you go to the moon, you have rocks there lying for millions of years, and you can also know the past. So present you can do with the modern technology, but past you can only do with moon rocks. And that was my project on the moon, a study of moon samples. So you can learn about surface processes on the moon, resources on the moon, either water or volatiles, and you can also learn about the interior of the moon. So this is very important. So a lot of science is involved in this. Now, let me tell you what came out of Chandrayaan-1 mission. It is one of the most successful missions. I think one mission which has given more important and more scientific data than many other missions. So let me tell you what was the lunar concepts before Chandrayaan-1 was launched. People used to believe that the moon's origin is hot. So hot origin of moon, that is high in refractory elements um, like calcium and aluminum and all that, and low in volatiles like iridium and indium and tin and so on, antimony and so on. So this is what they used to believe. First is hot moon, second is dead moon. That there is no volcanic activity now, at least for the last 3 billion years. It was active volcanically before, but not now. The third was dry moon. There is no water and no atmosphere. This picture has changed completely by Chandrayaan-1 data, and I'm very happy that it was so successful. It depends on lot of not only hard work, but also on some kind of luck. So it paid off to go to the poles of the moon because we discovered water there. There's no water on the equator. Actually, I was myself working on moon samples, and we knew that moon rocks are bone dry, absolutely no water even of crystallization. Now we understand why there's water on the poles and none at the equator. So I just want to have a summary slide here. When new science was to be done, so we had polar orbiter, communication, we had our own antennas, miniaturization. So we were lucky to have foreign collaboration, and now it is a normal thing to have collaboration. Before Chandrayaan-1, every country was doing his own. In fact, after my talk at the conference, one fellow from NASA was there, and he gave a talk, and he said, I remember it is still, that space mission should be like Olympics. One who is the best should win, and not we should collaborate. But now, as you know, probably from newspaper reports, NASA wants very much to collaborate with us and have many missions together. Even Japan has, and many countries, even Russians, they all want to collaborate. But at that time, they were just laughing and saying, well, not believable that you can go to the moon. Then, of course, we touched the moon, as I said, with the Moon Impact Probe. And I was wondering all the time how they can put 28 kilogram extra when our rocket cannot take. And what they did was very nice thing. There are 6 pencil rockets. I can show you later on, I think on PSLV. They increased the height of each rocket by 1.5 foot. And when we asked these rocket people, I mean, has it been tested? They say, no, it is the first time we'll test it with moon mission. So, you know, we lost a heartbeat there. But anyway, by increasing the height, and that was very innovative, this is called extra large now version of PSLV. And the most difficult challenge came is that all instruments look at one point. That means 100 kilometers away. If you are here and you want to look at, you know, something in Mehsana or beyond, one small statue on the road, I think it is very difficult that 11 instruments will look at the same point. In fact, SMART 1 mission was this by European Space Agency, a very highly technical, good mission with new propellant technique and so on. But they missed on this focusing on one point. All instruments were looking at different points, and the science outcome was very little. Then, of course, this 15-day parking orbit. So we launched the rocket on 22nd of October, and on 5th of November, we designed it such that it would go towards moon, and at the right time when minimum energy is required to enter moon's moon's orbit. So there was only a 10-minute window there. So we took a chance. That was early morning around 6 o'clock, that the sky was clear. But eventually, this after some 8 or 9 months of very satisfactory working, this instruments became very hot, and one had to raise the temperature to 200 kilometers to reduce the heat coming back from the moon. For some time it worked, and then of course we lost the antenna after some time. So this is the story of it. So let me tell you what we have learned from our Chandrayaan mission. It has 3 types of water. That is what we have learned. One type of water is brought by comets, meteorites, and asteroids as they hit the moon. That is one type. The other type is the inherent water which acquired when it was formed, and then water produced by solar wind hydrogen. Solar particles are full of hydrogen. When they react with oxygen in the silicate on the moon, they produce some water. So these 3 types of water were discovered. Actually, plenty of this, some billion tons or something is there lying on the moon's this thing. But there's one more type, earth water, I'll show you shortly, which is yet to be discovered. So this is something we can do in the future. So moon has an active atmosphere and hydrosphere. Moon has active volcanism, 2 to 60 million years old. Earlier we used to think it is 3 billion year old, 3,000 million year old volcanic activity, but we discovered even 2 million year old activity. Moon has also tectonic activity. That means moonquakes, like earthquakes happen on Earth, they occur on moon, and it has an active interior, and the whole moon surface was molten once. So these are many things which we have learned from this. And of course, this innovation, miniaturization, reliable instruments, this Space Application Center, ISAC in Bangalore, PRL, LEOS, SPL, and many other laboratories contributed to this. So it is a great teamwork, and now this has become a model of international collaboration, and 16 nations participated in this. So you see, this is a path-breaking objectives it set. I don't have much time, I guess, to go through this, but moon has an active water cycle. Of course, few atoms, few molecules of water are there. Hydrogen and iron react and make water plus iron. So this is how this is made. So all these 3 kinds of water were discovered. Now I want to talk about the 4th type of water, that is when moon is going around the earth every month. And out of that, 5 or 6 days it spends within the magnetosphere, the tail of the earth, the magnetic tail of the earth. At that time, the ocean water get ionized and can interact with moon. It goes anyway high up in the atmosphere, and that is another one which still remains to be discovered. So I would like to summarize here that 1995 we had the rocket launching capability. 1999, Dr. Kasturi Rangan, when he was chairman, he approved the moon mission. Then we had a meeting in Indian Academy of Sciences at Lucknow, where a proposal was discussed. We had a meeting in SAC on Astronautical Society of India. Again, we reviewed it. Then 2000 Moon Mission Task Force was constituted. 2002, we had a feasibility report. And then 2003, it was approved by the Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee on Independence Day from Red Fort. And we said we'll take 5 years, and exactly in 5 years, on 22nd October 2008, it was launched, and so on. And the impact probe happened to land on the moon on 14th of November. That is Nehru's birthday. So that also we can pay tribute to our former Prime Minister. It was not planned, but it happened that way. And the mission was completed on 28th August 2009 after 312 days of working. I will not discuss all this except to show one more result here, that these people in the Space Application Center, when they were making photographs, they discovered a tunnel which is about 7 kilometers long and several, 160 meters diameter. So, you know, a lot of meteorites and rocks. I talked about meteorites in my last talk on this forum. They fall on the moon and it has no atmosphere, so it is very dangerous. Here we are lucky to have an atmosphere. Most of them burn away or reduce in their size, except the very big ones. So if you want to hide somewhere in moon, this can be our next habitat. This long tunnel, 100 feet, 100 meters diameter, and so on. So discovered water, and this is the water map of the moon. See, there is water here near the pole, both the poles. This is a picture taken in 3 micron, which is the water absorption band. So, but there's no water here on the equator. There is another big discovery which Dr. Bharadwaj, who is our director at PRL presently, his team has discovered, and that is a lot of solar winds come and hit the moon. That is something like 100 million particles every second on every square centimeter. Very high intensity gun it is, or gun of hydrogen. And they found that about 10 to 20%, more than 10% are reflected back. And this mechanism is very important to understand how these things go back from the moon. And there are some suggestions about bubble formation and so on. There's evidence of global melting. At one point of time, the whole moon was molten, and what happens when the moon is melted is that iron titanium silicates are formed, and they sink because the density is heavy, and aluminum and calcium, which is light, their silicates come and rise, float on this molten magma. And that is what we find on the moon. We find the white part, the shining part on the moon, that is calcium aluminum silicate. And somewhere we find dark part, that is volcanic, has come from interior, has high iron and titanium and things like this. So there is a little interior which is unmelted. There is a large mantle, and there is a little crust which is made of calcium aluminum silicate. So this is what we have learned. And you see in large craters, you have this pink type of thing, that is magnesium spinel, which has come from interior. So we even know what is there inside the moon without going there, because things are thrown out and they can be learned. And these spinels are found everywhere. This pink thing is the spinel, northoside, and this recent volcanic activity is shown by the white circle you can see here, for example, and here, and so on. So it is a global phenomena. So we say the whole moon surface was molten. So moon is active moon, and we have written an article which those of you who want to understand in more detail can look at this article, which is called Active Moon, and it came in Geophysics, Geoscience Frontiers. I'll give you the reference. So this is our summary. This paper is in Geoscience Letters in 2014, where all the details are given. The title is Active Moon, Evidence from Chandrayaan-1. And the water molecules and several other species were found. Hydroxyl and water molecules on lunar surface materials. Reflected solar wind, I talked about it. Subsurface ice layers below permanently shadowed crater. That is why we went there. And sodium also has been found in lunar surface. This is work done by Shyama and Dr. Sri Kumar on X-ray instrument. and young lava regions, recent magmatic activity. Some 100 such regions have been found, and new rock types have been discovered. This is done at PRL and other places. And so the conclusion is that moon has a hydrosphere, has many sources of water. The surface layer is like permafrost in complicated and active exchange with the atmosphere. Global melting is there. Moon is still active. Refractory enrichment is not required, and habitation dissemination is very good if you go to the pools. That's why Chandrayaan 2 was sent to the polar region, because if there is water, you can do many things. You can separate hydrogen and oxygen. With hydrogen, you can propel a rocket or develop energy and get energy, and you can live there. And if oxygen is there, even humans can live. So this is, in short, the story of the moon. And I must mention and express my grateful thanks to various chairmen, Dr. Kasturi Rangan, who initiated it, and Dr. Radhakrishna's time when it was finished, and Dr. Madhavan Nayar's, during which it was executed. And there are lots of people, normally people, we don't know the name of the scientist, but I have here Radhakrishnan, George Koshi, Hegde, Dr. Goswami, Pichai Mani, Leo Jackson. They all contributed in various ways. And in the Space Applications Center, our chairman, past chairman, Dr. Kiran Kumar, Dr. Ram Ratan, Isaac, Dr. Annadurai, Adimurthy is an expert on orbits, and Sridharan and Dr. Bharadwaj, Shiv Kumar, who built the antenna, and Dr. Alex and Dr. Kamlakar, and so on, and Gopal Krishna and Anant Krishnan, who reduced the data and made important contributions. This is the picture of the South Pole, obtained with Chandrayaan 1. You can see how smooth it is. And I'll end my talk by showing you various types of moon. You may be doing it, but I'm always excited that there's only one moon, but we call it by super moon, by honeymoon, by hunter's moon, by blood moon, and blue moon. I hope you know all of them. Super moon is when moon is the closest to the earth. It looks really big and bright. Hunter's moon is in the polar regions when there is one moon, but you see its reflection because of ice in the atmosphere. Snow crystals in the atmosphere gives you an image which almost looks like another moon. Blood moon is the red moon when moon is in the penumbra, when the eclipse takes place on the full moon night. And blue moon is when you have two moons within 1 month, because normally the moon's orbit is, 1 month, so 29 days or something. And it's very unusual to have two moons in 1 month, but there are some exceptions. That's why we say once in a blue moon. And honeymoon, of course, is the most interesting thing. I must tell you about it. That the name came from May and June full moon nights, because in Europe it is very cold during winter, so people cannot go out for honeymoon. In the winter it is cold and ice everywhere, so they wait for May and June when summer sets in and the moon looks like honey-colored moon. So many moons, moon has many faces, but there's only one moon, and it is actually, we owe our existence to moon, as I've tried to explain. Thank you very much. I close here, but there's one slide here. The ISRO has a very powerful future program. A solar mission is going, Aditya. Chandrayaan 3 is with the land rover is in the making. Then ISRO, NASA collaboration on synthetic aperture radar, Mars orbiter mission, Gaganyaan, humans in space, Venus probe, Shukrayaan in 23, and Avatar and SpaceX and ExpoSat, and finally we may even go to asteroids and comets. So thank you very much for listening to this story, but I thought I'll stop here, if leaving some time for questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Bhandari sir, for enlightening us. And I would just like to summarize this entire talk in a couple of sentences to the comments of Geetika Bhatnagar ma'am. It was a wonderful session, sir. You ignited our minds with the actual moon. So, if you can kindly give us your esteemed permission, can we have a few questions from the chat box and the other platforms?
Surely.
So I would just like to invite my co-host Subhan Raj to kindly help me out, and we will be taking, you can say, at maximum 6 questions for this today, because I know our esteemed speaker for the day has got further appointments because it's a busy day schedule out here with the upcoming anniversary of Dr. Sarabhai. So Shubhan, I would just request you to kindly browse for the questions that are relevant to today's talk. We know that Bhandari sir has got a huge experience and he dons various hats for variety of you can say cosmic studies of the dimensions of the universe. But today we will confine our questions especially to the Chandrayaan and Moon. So, sir, I would just like to begin with 2 questions from Dr. Ankush Bhaskar and Dr. Sandeep Bhattacharya. So, Ankush Bhaskar ji has asked that do we have any observations of the evolution of the internal magnetic field of the Moon? Over to you, sir.
Yes, you see, it is a very complex thing. The rocks of the moon have magnetism, but moon does not have any magnetism like what Earth has. It does not have a convection current or anything inside, so it doesn't have any magnetic field now. So when the rocks were formed, surely there was a magnetic field, and these are most of the moon rocks were formed in the early ages between 4 and 3 billion years, maybe 4.5 and 3.1 billion years to be precise. So there are many theories. One is it is shock induced. I mean, somebody has proposed shock induced magnetism. That when something comes and collides, then due to shock, some magnetic field can be generated. And that is one way of looking into it. And the other is that, of course, when moon was very close in the beginning, as I said, it was something like as close as 20,000 kilometers. One of the calculations show 4.5 billion years ago, and slowly it has moved away now to 400,000 years. So when it was close to Earth, maybe Earth's magnetic field also affected it. So we really don't know. That is a problem of future, but certainly moon rocks show some remnant magnetic field.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for such an elaborate answer, and I hope that the queries of Dr. Ankush is being satisfied. And sir, I would now just request Sandeep Bhattacharya sir to kindly unmute yourself and you can ask the question that you have forwarded to today's chat. Sandeep sir, if you are on the line, you kindly unmute yourself and you can elaborate your question to put forward to Dr. Bhandari. Sandeep sir.
Okay,
Yes.
Very good afternoon, sir. It's nice to, I have not seen you any time, but once I came in contact with you during the Pali meteorite.
Yes.
This is regarding, the question is in one of your slides, you mentioned about refractory arrangement. What is that?
Refractory elements.
Arrangement. In one of your
Right.
slides.
I don't know. I think what I meant is refractory element.
Last but second slide.
What I meant is refractory elements.
Refractory elements. Okay.
Because what happens is that moon was hot, so all the volatiles are lost.
Yes.
That is what was believed.
Hmm.
And this crust, what the white part, the bright part of the moon we see is calcium aluminum silicates.
Yes.
So that is refractory. Calcium and aluminum both are refractory elements.
Okay.
Then they said that the moon is deficient in volatile elements and enriched in refractory elements because it was hot.
Okay.
And all potassium and things are lost. But what Chandrayaan 1 has found is there is water and there are also volatile elements. They are concentrated in certain areas. And they are not, of course, crust is there, but some of them have gone down inside.
Yes, sir.
So,
Thank you, sir.
So it is the mass balance we are doing. A whole moon, bulk moon composition we
Thanks,
calculate and match with density. That is how we know what is there inside.
So thanks Sandeep sir and thanks Bhandari sir for having this discussion regarding the refractory enrichment and other sort of the concepts that are associated with the Chandrayaan. And before I forward the baton over to my co-host Shubhan, if he is here, then I would just like to take final question. That is Mr. Anup. Sir, he has asked, that is almost a year after the orbiter was launched, it started suffering from a few technical issues. That is regarding star tracker and the thermal shielding. And then later on the communication was stopped. So he just wanted to know from you, that is what were the that is probable things, that is why these things happened, and what were the issues or the results that were taken by ISRO later on for the upcoming missions. And secondly, he wants a bit of opinion the lander of Vikram for Chandrayaan 2. Over to you, sir.
The second one I couldn't hear. What is the second part? This is about.
So the second part is regarding the Vikram lander, that is Chandrayaan 2.
Huh. So you see, moon gets heat from the sun, also some heat from the earth because reflected light goes there, and also some heat from the moon itself, which is reflected, goes to the orbiter. So these three sources contribute, and we didn't have an active kind of system to remove this heat. It is a passive, what you call passive system, in which we put a thick copper plate. So because on the sun side, the temperature goes to 200 degrees centigrade. And on the other side, it goes below zero. So how do you keep a temperature normal so that instruments will operate? Instruments operate only between, you see, between 0 and 20 degrees or something centigrade. So we have this passive shield. The heat from the brighter side, the warmer side goes to the colder side and then dissipated. So there was some difficulty in that. I think maybe some at 100 kilometer, lot more heat was coming from the polar region, because we don't know, maybe it is reflected more from the sun, or so we had to raise the temperature to 200 kilometer, where it became little bit cooler. So, but there also it was working all right as far as thermal shielding is concerned. But then the communication with the antenna broke, as you know, and then of course if it doesn't talk to you, you can't do anything. You can't send it to orders, and it can't receive the data. So the mission was at that time abandoned, and it worked for 9 or 10 months, and it was supposed to work for 2 years. Some fuel was left, but we couldn't communicate with it, and I think some experts can tell you more about what exactly happened, but that is only guess, because when you can't talk, and same thing happened with Chandrayaan 2, that we couldn't communicate with antenna. If we had communicated, then the Vikram lander would have been controlled, but the communication was lost. So other things are manageable these days. Even you can correct your electronics, or you can replace your instruments because they are all software based. But when communication is not there, there is very little you can do. So this Vikram lander has fallen some 500 or 600 meters away from the destined plate, and I think it has broken down. Some part may be intact, but I don't think it can be made to talk. But its picture has been taken subsequently, and it is lying there. I think maybe its legs are broken or something like that. But antenna probably is not in the same direction as we can communicate. So they tried with the NASA mission also, if at an angle, because that can go to very grazing angles, we can communicate, but it didn't work out.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Narendra sir. And Shubhan, if you are over the line, then you kindly take the charge and we can have the final three questions. And before getting the parting comments from Bhandari sir and the closure of the session. Shubhan, if you are here, kindly unmute yourself.
Yes, I am just taking the questions. So I have got three interesting questions from Pratik Trivedi. I am asking all the three in a combined question, and the question is, which of the two studies provided more scientific answers, analysis of samples returned from Apollo missions or information gathered by combined Chandrayaan missions? Also, the conclusion on the lunar samples studied by the Bhandari sir.
Yes, you see, they are very complementary in nature. When you have Apollo samples in hand, as we had here, we had a proposal and we got samples from Apollo, all the Apollo missions, all the 6, and also both the lunar missions. Then you can work in detail in the laboratory, and you can particular area, at the most you can extrapolate to that area, that site, okay, 100 meters or something. But what you get from orbiter is a global view. So, for example, you can never know that Earth looks like blue, you know, blue ball from space, unless you have a global view. You can say it rains here, but we don't know where else it is raining. So both are complementary, and the discovery of water has not come from Apollo rocks because there is no water there. So moon has a large variation from region to region. If you want to have a global view, you want to have an overall picture, you have to have a coarse painting, then of course take a satellite and bring it close to the moon as far as possible. If you want to study gases and ages and various things which can only be done in the laboratory, then the rocks are useful. Just to give an example, we had this probe which descended on the moon, as I said, on the impact probe. It took picture of the moon as you see from the aeroplane. Between 100 kilometer and ground, it took something like 3,000 pictures. So this is like what you see the Earth from the aeroplane, and that view was not available before. Before we had is a local view from astronauts who landed on the moon, or a global view from 100 or more kilometers with a camera. So this gives you very important information, and with that you can learn so many other things which are not possible either from a close view or from a far view. So is that okay? You wanted some more questions?
Yes, there are two questions left, sir. The first question is from Rajiv Nair, sir. On which part of the moon there is the evidence of water?
On the South Pole and North Pole. And what happens there, let me explain in a minute. The moon has 14-day Earth's 14-day type of day and night. In day, the temperature becomes 120 degrees centigrade, so water boils off. And the night it goes 130 degrees below zero, so water condenses there. But on poles it is much less temperature. It is something like 170 degrees to 200 degrees below zero. So all the water eventually, which is brought by comets or which is coming from inside with volcanic activity, eventually get transferred and sits on the poles. And their temperature is so low that it remains as ice. So that is the area where you find a lot of water in the shadowed craters where sunlight never reaches. There are regions where sunlight never reaches because of the angle of incidence of the sun on the lunar poles is very kind of tangential. So you get a lot of ice there. And if you integrate over large area, it is in billions of tons.
Okay, sir. My penultimate question is illuminating expositions on lunar hydrology. How do we differentiate the difference in chemical species of water? Any deuterium or tritium is found there or not? Heavy waters.
No, no, water is, you can only do it by isotopes of deuterium and hydrogen. You cannot do it any other way. So, I mean, if you measure the isotopes of hydrogen D2H, then comet waters are supposed to have some other ratio. The original water on the moon, what we call juvenile water, will have some other ratio. And the water which is now coming, it will have from the solar wind will have some other ratio. So it cannot be done, I agree, but there are ways in which even without making the ratio, you can get a general idea that this water from the location where it is found and from the amount, one can tell that this is interior water or this is cometary water. So it's a very difficult problem, I agree with you.
So thanks a lot, Subhan, for asking such a wonderful bunch of questions. So now I would just request my friend and co-host Swapnil Rastogi to be on guard for presenting a formal vote of thanks. And before that formal vote of thanks, I would just request our esteemed guest of the honor, speaker of the day, Dr. Narendra Bhandari sir, to kindly give us a few parting comments, because I had a few questions regarding how can example is in NASA is promoting the program of citizen scientists of late. So how can we, the citizens of India, as mentioned, we the people of India, as mentioned in the Constitution, be a direct part with the biggest collaborating team of the world in the form of ISRO? Over to you with your parting comments, sir.
Now, this is actually the way to go. And I think here also ISRO is trying very hard for student participation and public participation. We have proposal from SRM University and Nirma University in Ahmedabad, where students take or the faculty takes very active part. We have this planetary science program in PRL, Planex it is called, in which anybody can write a proposal, get funding, get guidance, and we have made certain kind of modules. Actually, let me tell you that one mission has so much data that it is impossible to analyze. And the scientists, what they do is they jump from one mission to another because there is no time available. So you are welcome to get the data. They are all on the computer now after correcting for latitude, longitude, time, and height and everything. All these data, that is called a Planetary Data Center, PDC or something like that, where all the data is available. And we have a policy that after 6 months or 1 year, they are made public. Anybody can use. But only thing is you have to do work at, at the world class level. I mean, for example, one friend of mine in Bangalore, she is trying to do crater counts, and she works in the planetarium. Shailaja, I think you may be knowing her. She taking different areas and teaching students, making software how to count craters. And size distribution of craters can give you an age if it is young. In very old surfaces, they get saturated. So you get the same spectrum, but in young ages, so there's a lot of work you can do by using this data. This is just one example I gave. I think depending on your expertise, you have to contact one of us or somebody in ISRO or in planets. And you are welcome to join. I think that will be a very great thing. In other countries, in USA, for example, this is a mission. They have sent a what you call as a CubeSat satellite, where simple things are done. A beacon is put, and when it comes, you see whether it is in Keplerian orbit or how it changes, and see the effect of gravity and so on. So there are many things one can do, but I think this is not the place where we can discuss. But you are welcome to join ISRO and ask somebody in space science department to tell you what are the openings possible. And they will fund you also, they will give you facilities, but you have to work seriously, like you know how people work. They don't go home for 2 months when the mission is on.
Sir, thanks a lot, sir. Thanks for such candid remarks. And it was really a wonderful session. And I would just like to add, as a matter of fact, that Planex is, you can say, one of the most pioneering contributions for the citizen scientist program. And then we will share the details of Narendra Bhandari, sir, Dr. Narendra Bhandari, over our forum, so that you can ping him up directly, and so that you can get the better details regarding the programs that are to be conducted. And apart from that, yes, as Bhandari sir has told, there are programs like Universe and others, and our Sukumar sir is here. You can contact him also directly, because he has been operating the citizen scientist program of Universe from India on the part of the observatory since long. And so also there are programs by Dr. Priya Hassan, Najam Hassan sir and all, regarding the archival astronomy data. And also not to forget, Dr. Bharat Adur is carrying out different studies in the field of meteors and their recovery and all. All these are formal as well as informal forms of study. You are really welcome to collaborate with these pillars of the modern Indian astronomy whom I have cited. And also at the same time, remember the contribution of the pioneers or the founding fathers of the space science and the astronomical programs of India. So on behalf of all the collaborating institutions, I would extend a warm thanks to the speaker of the day, Dr. Narendra Bhandari. And if our esteemed co-host, my friend, younger brother Swapnil is here, I would just request him to kindly unmute yourself, Swapnil, and present the formal vote of thanks for the formal closure of the session. Swapnil, are you here?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you,
So
Amritanshu ji.
over to you, Swapnil.
Thank you, Amritanshu ji, and thanks a lot, Mr. Bhandari sir, for taking us on a wonderful ride on the legacy of Chandrayaan-1. It can't be a better tribute to Vikram Sarabhai, who like the founder of Indian Space Research Organization. So I have read somewhere that Chandrayaan-1 was like planned to be on a moon for almost 2 years, but due to some technical issues, it got their contact failure on 29 August 2009, and ISRO officially declared the mission over. But still, we would like I would like to, like, as I have read somewhere, that it achieved its 95% of this planned objective. So really, it's a great to know more about it. It's like because of you, kind of scientists, we know more about the moon or other planetary objects around our Earth. So uh, I want to thank all the collaborating institutions like our WIPNET clubs, like Sky Foundation, Edustem Initiative, and all the WIPNET clubs, and our intellectual partners for organizing such type of programs for the public welfare and public domain. In this way, we can create some awareness and inculcate a type of inculcate the astronomy thing among the scientists. We are looking forward to create citizen scientists, so we need to aware the people the basics of astronomy and the things what is relevant to the astronomy. So without taking any more time, again, I would like thanks a lot, sir, for taking your time. We heard your last session as well, the falling stones, and it was also a very nice session. We're looking forward to hear such more from you, and your experience must be beneficial for all of us. I hoping the same, like all like your sessions. Thanks a lot.
It has been a pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you,
Okay,
Swapnil,
thank
for such kind words. And actually, I would just also like to inform Vaibhav Rajput ji, Dr. A.P. Jayaraman, and Vijay Raghavan sir, your questions were not probably taken because of the shortage of the time, but we assure you, and also Pradeep ji, that we shall mail your questions to the speaker of the day, and you shall be soon getting your detailed reply regarding their questions, because they require a detailed analysis. They are quite theoretical in nature. So we assure you from the Sky Foundation that yes, you shall be getting the replies soon from the speaker of the day. And so on behalf of Sky Amateur Astronomers Club, Ignited Minds Women-led Science Club, Dr. Raman Science and Technology Club, and also Akash Ganga Center for Astronomy, we extend warm thanks to the speaker of the day and also the special guests, Sandeep sir, Dr. J.B. Mistry, Dr. Ramesh Chandra Kapoor sir, and Ankush Bhaskar ji, and also not to forget the opening ceremony host of the day, Dr. Bharat Arun. So we are really thankful to you. So kindly stay tuned to this official channel of Sky, that is Scientific Knowledge for Youth. We shall update you with the latest comings, and surely we shall see you soon on the same time, on the same day of the week, that is Sunday. On the upcoming days, we have the lecture of Dr. Brij Mohan Thakur regarding the science of the calendars. So kindly stay tuned with the Sky Foundation, and we shall be seeing you with the lecture soon on the coming Sunday. So kindly fill the form to get feedback form to get the certificate for the session. And on behalf of all the collaborators, I would just declare the formal closure of the session. So in the age of Corona pandemic, stay safe, stay healthy, stay home. With wishes for your best of the health, I bid farewell to all of you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. It was a really nice session.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Professor.